I said, barging into their bedroom. No one was in there. My mom's phone was on the bed, and it was weird that my dad's phone was also there. So where would Mom and Dad have gone, leaving their phones behind? Did something happen to them? I was getting anxious waiting for them to come back. At the same time, I was thinking about what I should do. My mom's brother, Uncle Martin, works at the bank next door. He stops by our house every day. It was the weekend, so the bank was closed that day. I still wanted to call my uncle to ask him if he knew what was happening. Uncle Martin, my parents are both gone, but their phones are here. Do you know where they could have gone? My uncle said, I don't know. I'm sure it's nothing to worry about. They'll be home soon. I went to bed. I began watching stuff on YouTube to get my mind off the issue. Speaking with my uncle had only made me more anxious. After a while, I began to nod off. I woke up with a jolt to a voice in the night. I listened carefully. The voice sounded like it was coming from the next room. Mom? I yelled as I was getting up. It was dark inside the house, and no one else was there. I checked the time. It was almost 10. Apparently, I had slept all day. I realized that I hadn't eaten anything either. On my way to the kitchen, I thought I heard that voice again, the one that woke me. It sounded like screaming. It sounded like screaming. It sounded like my mom's voice. It was coming from inside the wall. I put my ear against the wall when I heard the voice calling, Eddie! Eddie! I was scared. For a while, I stood staring at the wall in disbelief. I didn't have a choice. I had to listen to what it was saying, even though I was terrified. When I placed my ear against the wall, I heard the same voice. It was muffled, and I could barely understand what it was saying. All I could make out was my mom's voice screaming my name. What was my mom doing inside the wall? This doesn't make sense. Mom can't be inside the wall, I said, trying to stay calm. Then I got an idea. The basement. Mom's in the basement! I ran to the basement door. The door to the basement is always locked because it's infested with mice. When I touched the knob, the door creaked open. It had been a long time since we'd been down there. Inside, there was a dim light. Mom? I called out to her from the top of the stairs. At that moment, I clearly heard my mom say, Eddie! Eddie, honey! We're in here! I called out to her again as I nervously went down the stairs. Thank God, Eddie, Mom said. We're here! Come over here, honey! I could hear her clearly, but she still sounded muffled. As I came closer to the light, I saw dirt on the floor. Mom, is Dad there too? I asked. She replied, Yes, he's here, honey, but he doesn't feel well. We need your help. There were quite a few buckets under the light, and they were all filled with dirt. I looked up at the wall. It looked like a tunnel, but the entrance was caved in. Mom, what's going on? Why are you in there? I asked. Honey, it's a tunnel. Your dad started feeling faint as he was digging last night. I came in to help him, but the ground above us collapsed, and we got trapped, Mom replied. Mom, why was Dad digging a tunnel? I said in shock. She said, Eddie, I'll tell you everything, but you have to call your uncle and tell him to come over. We need to get your dad out of here right now. I ran upstairs, called my uncle, and told him everything. He arrived half an hour later, holding a shovel and a spade. My uncle and I started working. He carefully began removing dirt from the front of the tunnel. I started filling the buckets with soil and running up the stairs to dispose of the earth in our backyard. We dug out the entrance of the tunnel for hours. Finally, I could see my parents. My dad was lying on the ground. My uncle jumped in to help him up. He took him by the arm and carried him out of the tunnel. My mom was crying. I've been screaming for hours so that you could hear me. You found us just when I thought I couldn't scream any longer. You saved us, honey, my mom said, hugging me. I looked around. Mom, why was Dad digging this tunnel in the first place? I asked. I'll tell you everything, but first I need to attend to your father. Let's get out of here, she said, running up the stairs. I was left alone inside the tunnel, so I decided to look around. I wondered how long my dad had been digging. I walked deep inside. My dad had built a wooden structure to prevent the tunnel from collapsing. He even installed a power line and lit up the place with light bulbs. It was an engineering marvel. I was impressed. There was something sparkly on the ground that caught my attention. I looked down to investigate. Mom had dropped one of her earrings. There was a long tooth right next to the earring. I held it in my hand. It looked like a fang, but it was gigantic. Just then, I heard my uncle's voice. He was standing at the edge of the tunnel and calling out to me. "The tunnel's not safe. Please, get out of there," he said. I pocketed the fang. When I went upstairs, I saw my dad lying in bed. "How are you doing?" I asked him. "I was having difficulty breathing down there, but I'm okay now," he replied. Mom said, "I'm sure you have lots of questions. What I'm about to tell you may be upsetting. The doctors diagnosed me with a muscular disease. If I don't get treatment, I'll be bedridden. We found that it's treatable, but we can't afford the medicine. Your uncle realized that the vault of the bank he works for is on the same level as our basement. Even though it's a crazy idea, he told us we could reach the vault by digging a tunnel from our basement. Your dad has been digging this tunnel for 4 months. We know this isn't right. Your dad is making this sacrifice for me, and we only plan on taking the $2 million we need." "Why didn't you tell me you were sick? We could have figured something out," I said, hugging my mom. I couldn't sleep that night. What if they get caught? I'd lose them both. The thought upset me deeply. That night, I remembered the fang I found in the tunnel. I got up from the bed and pulled the tooth from the pants I had worn earlier. I picked it up to give it a closer look. A tooth this big could only belong to a wild animal, but it made no sense for a wild animal of that size to have died in the middle of the city. I searched for wild animal teeth on Google. This fang was bigger than any of the ones I found online. I decided to pay the tunnel another visit. Maybe I could find other body parts belonging to the animal. I scanned the walls and the floor with a flashlight. I didn't find anything. Just as I was leaving, I saw another fang on the ground. I tried pulling on it hard, but it wouldn't budge. I found a piece of wood and used it to unearth the rest of the tooth. Suddenly, it dawned on me. The tooth was still connected to a jawbone. After working on it for some time, I uncovered an entire jawbone attached to a skull. It was gigantic and must have belonged to a prehistoric animal. I carried the skull into my room and started searching online. What I discovered literally sent shivers up my spine. What I had found in our basement was a T-Rex. There was a T-Rex skull in my room. I didn't sleep that night. When my parents woke up, I told them about the skull. At first, they didn't believe me. They said it must belong to some other animal. They were only convinced after I showed them some different T-Rex skull samples. When I said, "Mom, we can sell this online and pay for your treatment," they stared at me. "Could this skull be worth that kind of money?" Dad asked. "Of course. We found America's first T-Rex fossil," I replied in excitement. The next day, we went to the Museum of Natural History. The museum director said, "This is a huge discovery. If I'm being honest, private collectors would pay at least $15 million for such a specimen. Unfortunately, we have a limited budget. We can only offer you $3 million. That amount was more than enough to cover my mom's treatment, so we accepted their offer. I didn't want this incredible T-Rex fossil to gather dust in some private collector's home. It had to be publicly displayed for visitors coming from all over the world. My mom got her treatment with the money we made from the fossil. My parents thank me all the time, but my dad deserves the real credit. Thanks to him, I got to touch a real T-Rex skull. We still have the tunnel. Sometimes I lightly scratch the dirt to see if I can find the remains of another dinosaur. I have yet to find anything, but I'm hopeful. I believe that our T-Rex wasn't alone.
My BF found out I still wear diapers. That's the day that my life got turned upside down. Let me explain so that you don't get the wrong idea. There's nothing physically wrong with me. I wear diapers because I'm terrified of losing control of my bladder in public. It happened once when I was about 12, and ever since then, I've worn them. It was a secret that only my parents knew about, up until the day my boyfriend showed up at my house for a surprise visit. As soon as he found out, he left my room. As the door closed behind him, I was sure it was over. I was really upset. I really liked this guy. He was friendly, and even my parents liked him. He wasn't like all the other testosterone-infused boys. I sat on my bed and dropped my head. I started beating myself up, wondering how different things would have been if I had just cleaned up my room. Why did he even show up unannounced? But before I could get too deep into my thoughts, my bedroom door opened again. It was my boyfriend. I couldn't believe it. I asked him to give me a chance to explain, but he didn't want to hear it. In fact, he started laughing. He told me that he had known the entire time we had been dating. I asked him how he knew, but he told me that it didn't matter. He liked me and that's all that counted. We all have secrets, he said. When I asked him what his secret was, he didn't want to tell me. All he said was, knowing your secret was one of the reasons I started dating you. I should have seen this as a red flag at the time. I should have known there was more to this guy, but I was just so relieved that he didn't break up with me that I didn't even think about what he was saying. I was still curious, though. I asked him how long he had known. I noticed when I sat behind you in geography last year, he said, and then he did something that sent chills down my spine. He got excited. He told me about how he knew then that he could take care of me. What he said was so wrong that I didn't know how to handle it. I asked him to leave. I needed time to think about all of this. Reluctantly, he went. A day later, I received a package at my front door. It was a box of diapers from my boyfriend with a note saying, I love you. Let me take care of you. I've felt pressure in a relationship before, but this was different. It made me feel like I had no control. Who was this guy? And honestly, what was wrong with him? That's when it hit me. I recalled all the sweet things he had done for me since we had been dating. The phone calls and gifts, the way that he seemed to know where I was and what I was doing, the way that he liked me sitting on his lap, even the pet names that he had for me. Baby, boo-boo, my little one. I knew then that he didn't love me. At least not as his girlfriend. He saw me as a child that he wanted to raise. Furious, I sent him a text, telling him that it was over. I never wanted to see him again. I blocked his number. I packed up everything that he had ever given me and asked my best friend to take it to him. A few hours later, I kept getting calls from a number that I didn't know. Eventually, I answered. It was him. He was angry. He told me that he didn't want things between us to be over. I told him that I was done. I hung up the phone on him. A few minutes later, I received a text. Reading it made my heart sink. It was from him. It said, if you break up with me, I'll tell everyone your secret. There was no way that I could let anyone else know my secret. I'd lose my friends. The entire school would make fun of me. Imagine the memes and stories on social media. My life would be over. I called him and begged him not to do it. He laughed and asked me if we were still dating. In that moment, I did the only thing that I could, the only choice I had. Yes, I told him that we were still dating. He told me how happy he was, and that he promised to take good care of me. It made me sick to my stomach hearing those words, but it got worse from there. Okay now, he said, Daddy's got a few things to do. I will speak to you later, and not a word to this to anyone, okay? That night at dinner, I barely touched my food. What's wrong? Asked my mom. I wished I could tell her, but if I did, my secret would be out. I told my parents that I was tired and asked to be excused. I climbed into bed and went to sleep. I wished that I could go to sleep and wake up with this whole thing being a dream. The next morning, I received a text from my boyfriend. I'll walk you to school this morning, baby. Just reading the message made me remember how powerless I was. But there was nothing that I could do but go along with it. 30 minutes later, he arrived at my house and greeted my parents in the friendliest way. They spoke for some time while I got ready. He smiled when he saw me and told me I looked great. The walk was quiet and awkward. He reached for my hand and I pulled away. Now, we don't want people to know anything, do we? He says. So I let him hold my hand as we walked. The day went slowly. Every time I saw him, I'd have to fake a smile and wave, even blow kisses at him and catch the kisses he blew at me. But with every moment that passed, I knew that I couldn't keep doing this. I had to find a way out. I snuck out to the bathroom just before lunch. My best friend cornered me there. What's up with you? She asked. As much as I wanted to tell her, I couldn't. I knew she would confront my boyfriend and then he would tell everyone my secret. So I did the only thing I could think of in that moment. I yelled at her and told her to leave me alone, but she kept pushing me for an answer. My emotions got the better of me and I said something that I'd later regret. What's wrong is that you're being too clingy, I said. It was a lie and it hurts me to say it, but it was the only way. I stormed out of the bathroom leaving her there. A week went by this way and then another. A month later, I hardly recognized myself in the mirror. I was tired, I had lost weight, I didn't laugh anymore. My life was this cycle of getting up and doing whatever my boyfriend wanted to do. I wasn't allowed to have friends anymore. He had access to my phone and went through it every day. Worst of all, I needed to send him messages every day telling him how much I needed him and how grateful I was that he looked after me. It was almost 2 months later when I'd finally had enough. I sent him a text asking him to let me go. He messaged me back with a photoshopped picture of me in a diaper. It was clear that he wasn't going to change his mind. As I lay in bed, I imagined my future. I pictured every day going through the same thing until I had nothing left. Years and years of being his personal slave. Imagining this future made me angry and gave me enough energy to break this mood that I'd been in. I finally felt like my old self again. I needed to find a solution. There had to be some way out of this. And then I remembered what he had said to me when he found out that I wore diapers. We all have secrets. For the first time in over 2 months, I was excited. He had a secret and I was going to find out what it was. But to do that, I needed to play into his game. So I changed my attitude. I became friendly towards him, more